All right, guys. Well, thank you all for showing up today. Listen, I like to ride my bike around the city. I mean, I prefer to commute that way, and you know, it's not always the easiest thing to do, which is why the Bike Coalition is here to help us out. And I'm really excited that the Bike Coalition doesn't stop with bikes. They think about pedestrians, they think about transit too, and how we can all work together. So it gives me, on that note, great pleasure to introduce Kit Hodge today. She's going to talk about the Great Streets Project, which is looking to make streets better for bikes, pedestrians, transit, and in general communities.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Topher. Hi, everyone. As Topher said, I'm Kit Hodge. I'm the director of the Bike Coalition's Great Streets Project. It is a campaign of the Bike Coalition in partnership with Spur, another local nonprofit, and with the support of Project for Public Spaces, which is an international placemaking organization, and Livable Streets Initiative, which, among other things, publishes Streets Blog. Who among here reads Streets Blog? Just curious. One, really? Okay. So our mission, this is pretty much the only slide with text on it, so don't worry about that. It's basically to return our streets to being great places and doing it fast, sort of more of the startup mentality. No longer waiting to create great plans that never get implemented. Sort of a San Francisco affliction is to spend a long time making plans that never go anywhere. They collect dust, they feed worms, etc., but they never actually end up on the street. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a lesson from the phone world. The technology world, if you will. Back in the day, when phones were invented, they were seen as a way to democratize the world, in part. To connect people, the idea was that some people might pick up the phone and call anywhere and meet some new people. And similarly, when highways were first invented back in the early part of the 20th century, the idea was that there's some kind of democratize the world, the country, by opening up the country to people to go across, experience new things, et cetera, et cetera. So what has happened? Well, in neither case did that really happen. It both happened and didn't happen. In the case of phones, people tended to more call their peers more often than not, just to expand the world that they interacted with. In the case of highways, as probably you guys all know, yes, there is a lot more mobility, but at the same time, we actually are just doing the same stuff, but further out now. So interestingly, though, the phone world, and this is sort of where we are right now, of course, in terms of the idea of highways taken to the extreme, kind of going nowhere. In the phone world, we've adapted. The companies got smart, like yourself, and said, well, hey, people don't just want to do one thing, make a telephone call. They want to do a lot of things with their phones. They want to do email. They want to do you know, games, et cetera. I mean, how many apps are there right now for the Android? A lot, right? So the idea being that when you have more options for this particular device, people can use them in different ways. It's not just one thing or bust. So how can we apply that mentality of sort of a diverse set of opportunities over the same platform to streets, rather than just having this kind of situation where you only have one thing going on? It may serve some purpose, but isn't kind of the be-all, end-all for most people. So this is a tiny graphic, and what it shows is the range of things that you could do with your streets. It's everything from having street trees to block parties and play streets. And I want to go through some of these ideas and talk about how can we use our streets to be more flexible, to take advantage of them so they're not just sort of a monoculture, but they reflect all the different ways that we all want to use our streets. So backing up a step, we base all of our work on the idea of a great place. There are 4 aspects to a great place. One would be sociability, uses and activities, access and linkages, and comfort and images. And around this green area are some adjectives that describe these different qualities. And then I know since you guys are more data focused, the blue area is actually ways that you can measure these qualities. So if you look at a great place, they should reflect all 4 quadrants and not just be one thing or another. And when you go to our streets right now, they may sort of dominate in one area, but don't tend to encompass the full range here. So how can we get, I don't know, perfect bullseye, for lack of a better phrase, and get the full experience? Well, here's a few different ideas. So this is Struge, and I can't speak Danish, so apologize if any of you are native speakers and are horrified by my pronunciation. Struge in Copenhagen. It used to be a regular street with cars going through it, pedestrians crowded into the sidewalks, people on bikes, trains, etc. And now it was converted to a pedestrian plaza. This is a very typical sort of European intervention, and increasingly actually in Asia as well, of just sort of taking over the street and turning it into a fully pedestrianized area with all kinds of interesting stuff, a fountain, lots of retail, other sort of points of interest, tables and chairs, etc. So this is a sort of a traditional European model. This is one of my favorite things in the world, actually. This is a Paris plage. Has anyone ever been there, out of curiosity? Now, this is an excellent example of sort of an adaptable street. This is normally a highway, Georges Pompidou Highway along the Seine. And a few years ago, the government said, how can we increase happiness for everyone in the city in an egalitarian way? Well, why don't we bring gallons of sand and beach umbrellas and put them on the highway and turn it into a beach during the summer? Sure, why not? So suddenly you have this amazing beach that's incredibly well used for a large portion of this highway. And it was trialed over a few different summers on the Seine, and now it's being turned permanently into sort of a promenade with all kinds of different uses on one side, and then on the other side it's turned into calming a highway into more of a boulevard feeling. So again, the idea of experimenting with streets taken to a logical end. This is Trafalgar Square in London. Anyone ever been here? Well, if you have, you might have been there before. It was turned, this area didn't exist. It was a big traffic rotary. And they just took it over and turned it into this amazing pedestrian plaza. Very similar to what happens in Copenhagen. But again, thinking big about how do we actually get people to be able to get to that monument in the middle of the street? Because right now, before this was turned over, you couldn't really get there without risking your life. This is also one of my favorite images. This is a street in Barcelona. And you'll notice that, yes, it has all kinds of great things going on. Seating facing the right way, protected bike lane, various parking facilities, planters, and a car path, and greenery. Now look at these materials. These are not expensive materials by and large. These are relatively cheap materials. You have paint, a little bit of plastic, a planter, and sort of well-placed benches and poles. And there you have it. You have sort of a modern street with all kinds of different uses. It's again taking sort of the base form of the street and rethinking it and adapting it to modern desires. So New York got wise to these European examples a few years ago and said, hey, what can we do in the US, and particularly in New York, to emulate some of this stuff? We can't afford to do sort of a European-style big plaza, but what can we do? Well, so they looked at a street near downtown Brooklyn, Sand Street, near the courthouse. One of the traffic engineers at the Department of Transportation there was having lunch during a jury duty break and said, hey, there's nowhere to sit. So he went out and said, well, why don't we put down some planters, some tables and chairs, and turn it into a little plaza? This is a super cheap intervention that, as you can see, is very well used. Not the most lovely thing, but it's incredibly effective. It's the least sort of least effort you can make to have a good result come out. And that was from a guy who was really, he had a driving glove, he had driving shoes, really into his car. So this isn't sort of an anti-car statement at all. It's just saying we want to have other things going on in our streets. So they began to scale that idea up. This is Madison Square in Midtown Manhattan, before and after. Before, you can see it's sort of a very dangerous crossing. Then after, and you have a separated bike lane that's green, expanded pedestrian area, tables and chairs, and you'll see it goes all the way up here. Again, very well used, managed by the local business improvement district. And then they said, hey, let's go further. Why not turn Times Square into a pedestrian plaza too? So this is sort of the day after. This is sort of what it looked like before. If you ever try to take a photo of yourself in Times Square a while ago, you would have to huddle and be lucky that you didn't get hit by a car in the middle of the street. So they put down, blocked it off with some orange cones, and they forgot to order chairs. So the day before, they went into a local hardware store and bought some lawn chairs. And before they put them down, people were already in them. So, very cheap intervention that's since become, I'll show you a more permanent version. Again, both of these on a trial basis to see if they worked and to collect data around that. So San Francisco has been taking that same idea and applying it here. This is a portion of the 17th Street Plaza over in the Castro. It's at Castro, 17th and Market. Has anyone been there? Great, okay. So as you know, when it was first in, not necessarily the most lovely place, but very effective. We've actually collected data about it, studied how it was being used. And not only, of course, did it drive more people to be there and to use it more often, but also increased a sense of community character, which I think is a very important change and impact of these kinds of interventions. So the city has, through its Pavement to Parks program, been looking for other opportunities to be doing this. And there's a few examples throughout the city now, roughly 3, and looking for more, some on their way. Very exciting. And in the micro, it's also been adopting something that's very exciting, which is sort of taking parking day, if you're familiar with that, to an official level. This is what's called a parklet. It's a divisadero. It's a raised platform that's flush with the curb, and then it has planters, seating, tables and chairs, and there's bike parking at the other end. And if you've ever been there, it's packed almost 24/7, which is great. It's an area that has relatively narrow sidewalks. And for those of you who are like, well, why didn't they just build the sidewalk to begin with? It's because it's very expensive here in the city to build out sidewalks. So for many years, areas that could really use it, like the Castro, like North Beach, et cetera, there's been a real struggle about how do we do that when it's so expensive, even if it's desired. So this is a really fascinating way of taking that problem on, again, on a trial basis, in partnership with the business there, Mojo Cafe, which everyone should go patronize, I hope. Buy a sandwich, good sandwiches there. And they're going to see how this works. It's about a 6-month intervention. They'll see how it works. We're doing data collection around it, looking at the impact to other businesses. And there's more coming online. There's one already at 22nd Street in the Mission, which is slightly different design. There'll be ones in North Beach and the inner Richmond, and there'll be lots more coming soon. The city is working on a permit to make this accessible to almost anyone. This is very exciting. So the next level up would be Sunday Streets. This is a Sunday Streets from last year in the Mission. By the way, it's happening again this Sunday in the Mission. I encourage you all to attend. It's a lot of fun. It's more of a recreational idea. It was based, came out of Bogota, Colombia, where they closed down, really huge number of streets every Sunday in the city, and you can bike or walk or run or hula hoop or, I don't know, I guess you could crawl if you really wanted to, or scuba dive through this huge course. And it's a way to have some healthy activity throughout the city that's available to everyone and that connects different neighborhoods. It's also just a lot of fun. Anyone ever been to Sunday Streets? Yeah. So you guys like it? Have fun? Yeah. And often it happens out here in the Embarcadero. This is another idea from New York, who's sort of taking the idea of Sunday Streets and thinking, well, can we do it more often and in sort of a smaller scale area that impacts other neighborhoods? This is a street in the downtown Brooklyn area, broadly speaking. It's called Weekend Walks, and it's taking sort of a mini area of a commercial corridor and turning it into sort of a block party atmosphere, minus the tube socks, minus the funnel cakes, minus sort of the more raucous programming. It's really about just bringing people out to enjoy the street and taking a second look at the businesses around there on a Sunday. And it's growing and growing. Similarly, there's a sort of phenomenon called play streets, which is very specifically tailored to having more space for kids to play. And if you live in a neighborhood where there aren't accessible parks, or for whatever reason it's hard for your child to play safely without supervision, this is often a good solution to that, where you open up the street to people, to families, to have some organized activities for playing. This is one in Queens and Jackson Heights in New York City. They also exist in Chicago, and there's going to be a new thing called the Mission Community Market here in San Francisco, taking off this Saturday from 11 to 3 on 22nd Street off of Mission. That's going to be a hybrid of a market and a play street as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that, especially if you have kids or know people who do. So this is actually a block party in San Francisco in the NOPA area from last year. And sort of the other, almost most basic opportunity to sort of do your streets a little differently, take advantage of them in a different way, adapt them. The most, American of things, the block party, the summer block party, a lot of fun. You just get a permit, you go out, you have some very informal activity, and you enjoy your streets and you meet your neighbors, but not too much, hopefully, for those of you who have concerns about knowing your neighbors too well. So just come back for a second. All these ideas are ways that, again, they're kind of like applications on a phone, right? They're applications for a street. And the idea that from the Great Streets Project is to make all of these easier for anyone to try. They may not be appropriate for every street, they certainly aren't. But if you have a desire to do a play street, Sunday streets, what have you, you should have the tools to be able to do that yourself or work with community groups, et cetera, to make that happen. So we're trying to make those more accessible to everyone and have streets be more flexible and reflect the many different desires of people to use them differently. So turning to the most iconic street in San Francisco, Market Street. You guys it's not quite your backyard here, but it's, I don't know, what would you call it? A neighborhood park, if you will, not too far away. So the city has been working on something called the Better Market Street Project, and it encompasses Lower Market Street, so roughly from Octavia, which is sort of down there, and all the way to the Embarcadero here. And the idea is to take Market Street and make it into a great place. So using a variety of methods to go beyond kind of its nature as not the friendliest, sort of not quite there kind of place. And this has been spurred in part by, yes, very basic need to repave the street. If you've been on it recently, it's very bumpy, especially because you have all those buses going through. It's just not very stable. But there's also been sort of a worldwide movement to refresh main streets in major cities, often driven by business interests, but widespread interest in making this happen. This is a rendering of Oxford Circle in London. I don't know if anyone's ever been there before. But a few years ago, the Business Improvement District there got together and said, we can do better. What we have is not quite competing well with, out-of-state malls, things that are attracting people. So what can we do to spruce this up and make it a more appealing place for people to come? So, why not put a floating ring in the sky? Why not? Why not sort of, add some more interesting lighting, some new sort of pillars here and some other pavement improvements. This is what the overview from the nighttime perspective was supposed to look like, with some new lighting, improved pavement, rationalized transit, etc. And then the daytime version too. So political realities had their sway, and it still looked like this a couple years ago because the political class did not agree with the Business Improvement District there. So, not too dissimilar from Market Street. You have the boarding islands, you have transit, you have boarded off pedestrian areas, big transit portals, and tons of people and lots of buses. So they couldn't do the full plan, but what they did do was take a cue from Tokyo and try to do something a little bit better. So this is a diagonal crosswalk. So you can see people crossing different ways. And if you look back to the previous photo, these were blocked off, so you couldn't do that movement before. So if you wanted to get from here to there, or here to there, you had to go a long way around. So what they've done there is knock those down, open it up, add some programming above, add little sort of bumps here to protect pedestrians from people turning. What else did they do? They improved the boarding islands here by narrowing them a tiny bit, actually, and they altered some of the pavement. And this isn't a very expensive intervention. It's a relatively cheap intervention, but what a difference that makes. This is just again, because I really like this. Boom, boom. Much nicer. So New York, not just dissimilar, has been doing the same kind of approach to Broadway. What can we do sort of short of a huge master plan that may never get rebuilt? What can we do immediately that makes a huge impact? So they've been trialing a few different things. This is by Columbus Circle, coming down Broadway. So I'm going to give a whole panorama. You can see they've added a green separated bike lane here, protected bike lane, pedestrian seating with tables and chairs and greenery. I apologize for the resolution, it's really terrible, but it's the best photos there are. And then Goethescope, sense of the scope, you can see it's all up and down the street there. Similarly, this is sort of the bird's eye view, or the street level view of what that feels like. And I had two guys come up to me who, a couple of days ago, who had been there and who had never really biked before. They said, we never biked before, but lo and behold, we found ourselves biking through Midtown Manhattan saying, hey, look at us. We're riding bikes in Midtown Manhattan. How the heck did that happen? And it's because you suddenly have this protected bikeway that's a lot more safe feeling for people who are not as comfortable on a bike. So this is the Times Square view. You can see it's turned into a pedestrian plaza, so the next iteration of it, and it continues to be improved. You can see the scope of it. It's now turned into it's going to be turned into sort of an artistic statement of sort of a look of a river, actually. Hasn't been built yet. Herald Square, a few blocks down, used to also be a very scary place to walk or to do pretty much anything else. Also very crowded. Now again, a pedestrian plaza. And then I want to turn to Taiwan, because it's not just about sort of formal interventions. You can also have sort of streets that are really ephemeral. So this is the Taiwan tourist night market. So during the day, it's just a street, but at night, it's opened up for this incredible bustling night market. I've never actually been there myself. Anyone been there? No? Okay, but it looks like a lot of fun. It's another sort of rethinking of the street, of a major street. Back in the good old USA, this is Denver's 16th Street Mall. It's a transit mall with a separated busway, huge pedestrian areas, and a lot of things going on there. And if they can do it in sort of good old Denver, we can certainly do it here. And then even in Bogota, Colombia, they've thought big about their main streets. This is downtown Bogota. Again, not too dissimilar from Market Street in sort of a superficial way. You have the busways, you have huge sidewalks with all kinds of things going on, biking, vendors, trees, etc. It's a very exciting image. And if they can do it in a developing country, certainly we should be able to do it here. And then our favorite example, the Champs-Elysees. 10 lanes of traffic usually. And oftentimes people point to the Champs-Elysees of the grand boulevard of the world. Why can't we be like this street? Well, even the Parisians are saying, it's not quite good enough. So why not turn it into a farm? So for a few days, a couple weeks ago, the young farmers of France took over the Champs-Elysees for part of it and turned it into a massive farm, complete with a petting zoo and everything. It's a huge change. If you look at that to that, it's really rethinking the street overall. So here at Market Street, this is Market Street of yore. It's been through many different iterations, of course. The Roar of the Four was the name for this because you had 4 lanes of trolley traffic. And if you can imagine what it's like now with the noise, imagine back then with that many trolleys. Very loud. And here we are today. We're kind of in this weird place, right, where we're not quite comfortable with what we have. It's not terrible. It's not great. We're kind of waiting to see where it's going to go. It's kind of this middle ground right now. So I think this is a great representation of that. The city recognizes that. So this is a little bit cut off. But so they launched this Better Market Street project. And the goal of it is, again, to turn Market Street into a great place. They're going to be reconstructing the street beginning in 2013, 2014. And so they've set some goals for what that process will look like. It includes prioritizing the needs of pedestrians, transit users, and cyclists while accommodating necessary vehicle traffic. And then also improving the public spaces on Market Street, to name a few different items here. So what they've done is really interesting. It's kind of incorporating this new, more flexible view of streets into a traditional process. So you have the usual sort of public visioning with concepts, designs, and engineering designs going to actual implementation beginning in 2013. They've also added this, which is cut off, startup phase, where they've been trialing and also different ideas and introducing things right away to see how they work and to inform the longer term process. It's very exciting. It's kind of taking the startup model and applying it to streets for a change. And this is kind of a huge deal for a city that's very sclerotic, like most cities. So a lot of the work is based around this, again, this place diagram. So in this initial startup phase, I've been doing a few different things. I'll run through them very quickly. On the sociability phase, they've been doing this Peoples and Plazas concerts in public spaces along Market Street. In the uses and activities category, this is some of the public art that's been put in shuttered storefronts on the mid-market area. And then in the access and linkages section, there's now required right turns for people who are driving alone on Market Street. It was at 6th and 8th Street initially, and now it's at 6th and 10th Street. And this idea there is to open up the street for transit to run more smoothly, and also to improve safety for bicycling and for walking. And I have to say, taxi drivers love it too, not surprisingly. Another really fun thing that's been happening, much to our pleasure, is these new separated green lanes on Market Street. And this is kind of the very temporary version, sort of just get it out there, of what Market Street could look like for bicycling. You have these very basic soffit posts. They're just plastic posts, every few feet, and then some temporary green paint that's out there. Just sort of, how does this work? Does it work? Is it making people safer? Are more people bicycling? And the responses that we've gotten so far have been overwhelmingly positive. This is Supervisor Eric Marr with one of the SF Bike board members riding on it on Bike to Work Day. last but not least, on Powell Street, last December there was a trial to open up more pedestrian space on that very crowded street. Probably many of you avoid Powell Street, I'm guessing, because it's so crowded. Yes, okay. I don't know anyone who tends to go there if you live here because you love to get jostled around by everyone. So they recognized that, and working with the Business Improvement District, they took barricades and just put them where the parking lane would normally be. It was a little confusing and it rained the whole weekend, so the trial wasn't very informative. However, the city is now working on, with the bid, on looking at another more robust trial that would be at level and much nicer, potentially with seating and other sort of programming for the length of on Powell Street between Ellis and Geary Street. So if you can imagine suddenly having a much bigger pedestrian space with all kinds of programming there, it could be very, very exciting, especially if you can do it fast, Parklet style. Sorry, last but not least, Green Pod and Comfort and Image section. This is at Market Street on 8th. Near Hotel Whitcomb. Often if you bike, you probably know it as a place where all the tour buses back up. But if you also look there, there's this sort of public seating area. And why this is important is that public seating was deliberately removed from Market Street for many years, so there's actually no public seating except for at Mechanics Plaza near New Montgomery. This is the first time that public seating has been added back. I think there's a lot of ambiguity with this location. People don't recognize it as public seating because it's sort of managed by the private entity, and that's a work in progress. But it's a nice step in this new direction of adding things back, so there can be a place where you can sit down and cool your heels, besides the fire hydrant. So this is the web page, and I apologize, the URL is getting cut off on the screen, for the city's Better Market Street project, and I encourage you to go there to give feedback. There's a whole feedback section here where you can do different ways, Twitter, Facebook, 311, etc. And also keep abreast of what's going on. And then we also, because people don't usually like to do that, come to our, we have a Facebook page dedicated just to the Better Market Street project itself. So I encourage you to become a fan of that and keep abreast of what's going on there. And so that's Market Street project, and that's all I have. So I guess the takeaway really is that there's lots of different ways to use our streets, from small to large, and the city's been embracing a lot of these right now. And right now it's a pretty exciting time, and hopefully all of you can get involved in taking advantage of this new momentum and applying them to your streets. With that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Yeah?
There was a lawsuit or something trying to stop more bicycle paths.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
So there's an injunction by the court that prohibited any kinds of bicycling improvements for 3 years, for the last 3 years. The injunction was partially lifted, and I should say it was brought by one guy, one blogger, and one lawyer. The injunction was partially lifted last November around Thanksgiving, so a few projects have been able to go forward that have more of a temporary nature, things like sharrows and very small bike lanes, and one green bike box on Scott Street in the Lower Haight. There's actually a hearing next week at the judge's office to see whether he's to hear the case again, decide whether to lift the injunction completely. And once that's lifted, then all the things that have been pent up for so long can be finally implemented, which is very exciting. So knock on wood, that'll be fast to come.
Can you say anything about the other politics that go on behind the scenes? Who's supporting the great streets, sort of opposition you're running into?
I think what's really great is that it's an unlikely set of supporters happening right now. You have an incredible convergence of all kinds of people who in the past were very skeptical of any sort of changes to streets. I think partly because it sort of phrases like the "Are you a Mac or PC?" kind of version, which is, who cares, right? So right now I think you have business folks who are behind this stuff, who are clamoring for it. In fact, you have the mayor's office who's very supportive of many of these initiatives. You have all kinds of the agencies supportive of it. Of course, community groups. You're always going to have people in San Francisco, or any city for that matter, opposed to any project. If you offer people apple pie, they'd probably say, how dare you use X apples, or offer me on Monday as opposed to Tuesday. But it actually has been incredibly supported, which is very encouraging. And I think it speaks to the pent-up demand for this sort of fresh way of looking at streets. It's not just an either all cars or all something else that no one can think of, but it's kind of a more flexible space where there's room for all kinds of different stuff. Other questions? Yeah?
You mentioned that the like set up your own little parklet or something?
Yeah, so the cities are working on that right now. I've been helping them with that. And the idea is to have, people who have a certain set of qualifications in terms of management abilities, because it has to be well managed, to be able to do that. And so hopefully in the next few months there'll be a version of that out there, and it'll continue to be trialed and improved as we go along. But it's a very exciting opportunity. So if you know businesses in particular, or nonprofits or other entities who have management capabilities who'd be interested in this, definitely let them know, because this will be coming down the pipeline, and we want to get as many into the ground as possible. Yeah.
I live right by Mojo Cafe, so I've seen that little parklet a lot, and it's really great. And I always wonder how Mojo Cafe got so lucky that they happened to be the ones who got it, because it clearly, if you see it in real life, it clearly looks like it's an extension of the cafe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get the sense that patrons of other places would use it, so I was kind of wondering, how did that happen with Mojo Cafe in particular? Is it somehow privately associated with them, or are they just in the right place at the right time?
So first of all, it's a public space, and I think it's a sort of ongoing effort to make sure that's clear to people, and that people don't feel like they have to go buy something from Mojo in order to use it. And for any of the parklets, that's a very important thing. So that's a design issue that's still in the works. We've gotten feedback lots of different ways of, oh, of course I feel comfortable, or no way do I feel like I can do this. So it's sort of in the review process at this point. That said, in terms of Mojo's use, actually I called them and let them know that theirs is coming down the pipeline. It was, I knew that they were interested in doing more bike parking, because they have a crash in particular. And so they said, hey, this sounds really interesting too. Yeah, we'd be open to it. The city was looking for locations that would be open for a demonstration project. And so we're looking for people who are ready to go right away. Yeah. Yeah.
So I live in South Park, that park. And I know there's a number of restaurants there that really benefit by one of these, people too. The park is so busy at the time, there's nowhere to sit. And I think they could use some little parklets.
Yeah. So actually there's been a lady who's been trying to do that there. So I'm happy if you give me your email address, I can connect you with her, because I think she's trying to win the bureaucracy there to make sure it can happen. So yeah, I think what's great is that the city's gotten, and I've gotten a billion calls, well, a billion's an exaggeration, forgive me, many calls ever since these first went in saying, hey, how can I get one? And from unlikely places too. Way out in the western part of the city, as well as usual places like South Park. That'd be kind of very obvious kind of places for these, which is great. Do you guys have any feedback on kind of what you guys would like to see on Market Street? Just kind of curious. For those of you especially who commute on Market Street, whether it be surface, below, what have you. Yeah.
I find it a hassle to leapfrog with the buses.
Yes. Is that a general consensus?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the challenges has been and will be to figure out a way to, I assume you mean when you're on your bike, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To make sure that the bikeway is continuous, separated the whole way, and that you're not doing bus tag, because the vision is to have Market Street be a place where you can have your young child as well as your grandmother bike with you and feel very safe the whole way. And if you have buses coming in and out, that's not going to work. So there needs to be some sort of algorithm that will speak to how to do that, and will hopefully come out of this planning process. Yeah. Any other thoughts about Market Street that you guys are especially eager to see, or eager not to see for that matter?
They replace some of the gratings. Some of them can't operate.
Oh, really? Huh. Yeah, that's good to know. I hadn't been aware of that. Cool.
What's the timeline on the Market Street project?
Yeah, let me just put that back up. Basically, it's, oops. Well, it's going to take forever. So the visioning process should be kicking off, within the next few months. And then it'll be about a year or two of that process, which will be public meetings and other outreach things, usual kind of fun. And then it'll have to go to behind the scenes engineering, and then get built out, hopefully beginning in 2013 to potentially 2014. Yeah. So unlike the private world, if you're in a public process, public project, things take a long time, but actually for the cities is quite fast, so that's encouraging.
Pursuing anything up Fourth Street?
I'm sorry?
Are you pursuing anything up 4th Street that's similar, because they're going to be tearing it up so
Right.
quickly for the community extension?
Right. So that, I mean, it's a great question. That planning process, there's a whole separate planning process for that. So that will, you know, be an opportunity to weigh in for all kinds of improvements there. There's a newly formed community benefits district there, which I think has a potential to have a strong voice in that process in terms of saying, you know, let's do better than what we have now, which is pretty much a traffic sewer, right? What can we do? So there's a lot of needs there, certainly. But the Bike Coalition's vision is definitely to have separated bikeways all over the city, kind of like an interstate, but bikeways, and not going so fast, of course. Okay, well, it sounds like there's no more questions, so thank you very much for your time. Tell everyone you know.